From a president who beat his own assassin with a cane to a bullet stopped by a folded speech, the history of attempts on the lives of U.S. presidents is a catalog of sheer luck, bizarre circumstances, and profound tragedy. The fact that so many of these leaders survived is nothing short of a miracle. It all began on a damp winter day in 1835. Andrew Jackson, the seventh president, was leaving a funeral at the U.S. Capitol. Hiding behind a pillar was a man named Richard Lawrence, an unemployed house painter gripped by a powerful delusion. Lawrence believed he was the rightful king of England, Richard III, and that President Jackson was the sole obstacle preventing him from claiming his throne and a vast fortune. As Jackson passed, Lawrence stepped out, aimed a pistol squarely at the president's back, and pulled the trigger. A loud click, but no shot. The cap had detonated, but the powder failed to ignite. Before anyone could react, Lawrence dropped the first pistol and drew a second, firing again at point-blank range. Another click, another misfire. The odds of two separate, properly loaded pistols failing to fire in that humid air were later calculated to be 125,000 to 1. But Andrew Jackson wasn't a man who waited for fate to intervene a third time. Enraged, the 67-year-old president charged his would-be assassin and began furiously beating him with his walking cane. Congressman Davy Crockett, who happened to be nearby, rushed in to help restrain Lawrence. Only Andrew Jackson could survive an assassination attempt and immediately turn it into a public beatdown. It was a terrifying preview of the violence that would haunt the presidency for the next 2 centuries. While Jackson walked away, the next 3 presidents to be targeted weren't so fortunate. The period from 1865 to 1901 was the deadliest in the history of the American presidency. It started in the final days of the Civil War. On April 14, 1865, Abraham Lincoln was at Ford's Theater watching a play when John Wilkes Booth, a famous actor and Confederate sympathizer, slipped into the presidential box. He shot Lincoln in the back of the head with a single-shot derringer. Lincoln slumped forward, never regaining consciousness, and died the next morning. 16 years later, in 1881, President James A. Garfield was walking through a Washington, D.C. train station. Charles Guiteau, a man who felt he was owed a government job for his perceived help in Garfield's election, shot the president twice. One bullet grazed his arm, but the other lodged behind his pancreas. It wasn't an immediately fatal wound. In fact, Garfield almost certainly would have survived. But what followed was a medical horror show. For 80 agonizing days, a series of doctors, including the famed Alexander Graham Bell, who tried to locate the bullet with a primitive metal detector, probed the wound with unsterilized fingers and dirty instruments. They turned a 3-inch deep wound into a 20-inch long infected canal. Garfield didn't die from an assassin's bullet. He died a slow, painful death from sepsis caused by his own physicians. Then, in 1901, President William McKinley was greeting the public at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. An anarchist named Leon Czolgosz approached with his hand wrapped in a handkerchief, concealing a revolver. He fired 2 shots into McKinley's abdomen. One bullet was easily found and removed, but doctors couldn't locate the second. This was still the era before X-rays, and the operating room was poorly lit. They gave up the search, and just over a week later, gangrene set in. McKinley died. 3 presidents assassinated in 36 years. And still, remarkably, there was no permanent, mandated Secret Service protection. That brings us to perhaps the most insane survival story of them all. In 1912, Theodore Roosevelt was running for an unprecedented 3rd term on his Bull Moose Party ticket. Outside a hotel in Milwaukee, just as he was about to leave for a campaign speech, a saloon-keeper named John Schrank shot him in the chest. But Roosevelt was a man of extraordinary fortune. The .38 caliber bullet first had to pass through his steel eyeglass case, and then through the thick 50-page speech he had folded in his breast pocket. These 2 objects slowed the bullet dramatically before it finally lodged in his chest muscle, just short of his lung. Roosevelt, an experienced hunter, coughed into his hand. Seeing no blood, he correctly deduced the bullet hadn't pierced his lung. His aides frantically tried to rush him to a hospital, but Roosevelt refused. He had a speech to give. He walked onto the stage, the crowd unaware of what had just happened, and began by calmly announcing, "Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know whether you fully understand that I have just been shot, but it takes more than that to kill a bull moose." He then opened his coat to reveal his blood-soaked shirt and proceeded to speak for 84 minutes. The man was literally bleeding while delivering a political speech. Doctors later concluded that removing the bullet would be more dangerous than leaving it in, so Theodore Roosevelt carried his would-be assassin's bullet in his body for the rest of his life. The list of close calls continues. In 1933, President-elect Franklin D. Roosevelt was in Miami when an anarchist, Giuseppe Zangara, fired 5 shots at him. Zangara missed FDR but mortally wounded Chicago Mayor Anton Cermak, who was standing beside him. Zangara was executed in the electric chair just 33 days later. In 1950, two Puerto Rican nationalists tried to storm Blair House, where President Harry Truman was staying during White House renovations. A heroic White House police officer, Leslie Caufelt, engaged them in a shootout, killing one of the attackers before dying from his own wounds. Truman, who had been napping, was woken by the gunfire and came to the window to see what was happening, forcing the Secret Service to scream at him to get down. Then came the day that changed everything, November 22, 1963. President John F. Kennedy was riding in an open-top limousine through Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas. The crowds were cheering. The sun was shining. Then, shots rang out from the Texas School Book Depository. Kennedy was struck in the neck and then fatally in the head. The assassination, captured on film, sent a shockwave of trauma across the nation and the world. His accused killer, Lee Harvey Oswald, never stood trial. 2 days later, while being transferred from the city jail, he was murdered on live television by a nightclub owner named Jack Ruby. The event gave birth to a universe of conspiracy theories that still haunt the American psyche today. Kennedy's death forced a complete overhaul of presidential security. The threats, however, didn't stop. Gerald Ford has the bizarre distinction of surviving 2 separate assassination attempts in a single month. In September 1975, in Sacramento, Lynette Squeaky Frum, a follower of Charles Manson, pointed a pistol at Ford from just 2 feet away. A Secret Service agent grabbed the gun just in time. 17 days later, in San Francisco, another woman, Sarah Jane Moore, fired a shot at Ford. Her aim was deflected by a bystander, and the bullet missed Ford's head by inches. Just a few years later, in 1981, Ronald Reagan was shot just 69 days into his presidency. As he was leaving a speaking engagement in Washington, D.C., John Hinckley Jr. fired 6 shots. The presidential limousine was about to speed away when a ricochet, a bullet that bounced off the armored car, hit Reagan under his left arm. The devastator bullet flattened and lodged itself just 1 inch from his heart. Incredibly, Reagan walked into the hospital under his own power before collapsing inside. His wit remained intact. He famously joked to the surgeons, "I hope you're all Republicans," and quipped to his wife Nancy, "Honey, I forgot to duck." Reagan's grace and humor during the crisis sent his approval rating soaring, and the threat has continued into the 21st century. On July 13, 2024, at a campaign rally in Pennsylvania, former President Donald Trump was addressing a crowd when a 20-year-old gunman opened fire from a rooftop over 100 yards away. A bullet tore through the top of Trump's right ear, missing his head by less than an inch. He dropped to the ground as Secret Service agents swarmed him. Moments later, he rose to his feet, blood streaming down his face, and pumped his fist to the shocked crowd. A Secret Service counter-sniper eliminated the shooter almost instantly. The attack left 1 rally attendee dead and 2 others severely wounded. It was a chilling reminder that in the modern era, the threat can come from anywhere. 4 presidents assassinated. More than a dozen others targeted. It's a violent history written in misfired pistols, folded speeches, the quick reflexes of bodyguards, and sheer, dumb luck. Each attack, whether it succeeded or failed, has left a permanent scar. They've shaped the modern Secret Service, given us bulletproof limousines, and reinforced the constant, terrifying reality that the American presidency is, and has always been, the most dangerous job in the world.